Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us on the Leaders Unfiltered podcast. I am your host, Angela Alberty. I am very excited about today's show. We're going to be speaking through a lot of the things related to the workforce ecosystem, particularly as it relates to fractional support. Certainly there has been an upward trend in terms of having the agility to tap into C-suite and professionals all throughout different layers of the organizations across different departments. And that's exactly what we want to hit on how the workforce is evolving and tapping into the fractional support capacity, but also how this trend is transcending itself in through the working population. I am very excited to be interviewing our guest today, Beau Billington. Thank you so much for joining us. If you don't mind, could you just spend a couple of minutes letting the audience know about you and your career and what's going to lead you here and what we're going to be talking through today?
Sure, and thanks so much for having me on. Great intro, love the wind up, and obviously this topic is near and dear to my heart, and happy to kind of give you the quick and dirty on our focus area, how I got started in the space. And it's interesting, I've been in the fractional space for 8 years, and I've seen it change more in the last year and a half than at any time in the preceding 6.5 years. So it's a really exciting time to be in it, and thanks for having me on. But in short, the name of the company is The Free Agent. Been at this for about 8 years. We've worked with historically B2B SaaS, B2C SaaS companies, professional services companies, and then private equity and VC that have interest in tech-enabled. Most of our partners, revenue-wise, call it 4 or 5 million in ARR to about 30 or so million. We've got larger and smaller clients, but candidly, that's the sweet spot. Generally working with companies that are founder-run, founder-managed, and essentially they need to step out from the day-to-day operations and bring in some air support. But we focus across a couple silos: sales and marketing, tech and product, ops and finance. We still do some full-time placement, but fractional is definitely the space in which we're most bullish on and most interested in. And candidly, I'm most passionate about that space as well, which kind of ties back to my personal story.
All right, Beau, thank you so much for going over what the last 8 years have been and really you guys getting your start into the free agent and the market out there. Can you take it a couple of steps back and give us your origin story?
I can. So it was 2015, just had my first daughter, was in corporate America, it was right before Christmas holidays, and I was voluntold that I needed to be in Toronto for some customer meetings. But inclement weather was running in, and I didn't want to go. Candidly, I showed up. All my meetings got canceled because Toronto basically shut down.
Wow.
And I was very concerned that I was going to be snowed in and miss my first Christmas with my new daughter.
Wow.
And so I was sitting at the bar at one of the hotels by the airport, eating dinner, and ESPN was in the background talking about so-and-so is going to be a free agent in the new year. It was basketball. I recall that. I wish for the life of me I could recall who the star was. But the name really resonated with me, and that was kind of like my light bulb moment where I thought to myself, how cool would it be if I wasn't in Toronto because somebody told me I wasn't going to miss Christmas, but more so I was able to kind of maximize my life on my terms and cobble together a portfolio career that made sense for my family, for my wife and my new family. And I couldn't shake it, honestly. I flew home, I actually made Christmas, life was okay. I ended up staying in corporate America another 2 years, but I could not shake the thought of basically jumping out, being on my own terms. And that's kind of how the free agent conceptually was created. I then created a business plan, eventually mustered up the courage, jumped out of corporate America in 2017. Then I realized, of course, 6 months in, that my business plan hypothesis was total garbage. That's probably a topic for another day.
Yes.
That's kind of how I came up with the concept of free agent, and then realized that I also myself didn't want to do any consulting, but I feel like the value that I can provide as a human, as a business leader, is actually bringing two parties together. And that's kind of how it started, but it definitely started with a personal need, which was, this sucks. I don't like being told where to go or having to ask for vacation. There's got to be a better scenario out there for me and my family.
That is super powerful. And I think so relatable on so many levels across, having to make that commitment, travel during dangerous times, and then having what is the most pressing need for you at that time, which was your daughter being born and a very special time of the year. So thank you for sharing that. And obviously you bring a vast layer of experience because over the span of, I'm sure when you got started in this space, you've really seen a timeline evolve in seeing firsthand how organizations are tapping into fractional support capacities. And it's something that really drives my passion because I've had, obviously I'm the co-founder at My Base Pay, and some of our listeners may know that, but I would be remiss to not sit here as an executive in my career and not see the value. We've tapped into fractional support capacities on so many different instances. So I'm happy that we're talking through this, and I'm also happy that there's a personal testimonial that I can hopefully bring to some of the listeners in how it's helped us level up across our organizations under so many different circumstances, deadlines, especially from an agile organization that can tap into that. You and I had a chance to do a podcast a couple of weeks ago, and I feel like you're educating me through this process. One of the things that I love how you coined it is as moonlighters, right? And maybe you want to educate the audience on what a moonlighter is. And just to preface this question a little bit, I think that if you are an executive or, maybe looking at providing fractional support services, just welcome. You're not alone. There's a lot of folks that are in your position and looking at potentially considering multiple revenue streams. But Beau, perhaps you can talk to us quite candidly about what a moonlighter is and what are some considerations for folks that are sitting in this spot that are also considering going in through multiple streams, multiple roles all at once.
Yes, so great question, a lot to unpack here. I think moonlighting is great. It's been around for years. From my vantage, moonlighting is no different than somebody maybe taking a seat on a board. It can be very similar. Whether or not that's the right fit for a CEO's organization, that's really kind of up to them. But the individual can provide moonlighting services or not. As it pertains to our business, generally we work with fractional talent that is 100% invested in being a fractional executive. So they've kind of drawn a line in the sand, and that is their career path. So Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, they provide that type of service to their customers. Have done some work with moonlighters as well. And the definition from my perspective is somebody that has a traditional 9-to-5 job, but then in nights and weekends, they're providing their service for a fee to a company. It could be in a fractional capacity. It could be more project-based. There's a multitude of different kind of combinations or service offerings that could be offered. But that's really kind of my definition. But it definitely has its place. I would akin moonlighting more so to maybe like a Fiverr, where you're doing some sort of service for a fee. Maybe there's not a timeline, maybe there is, but ultimately you're providing some sort of project with a completion on top. But I've also talked with companies as well in the tech sector that have leveraged, a COO on a part-time basis that also has a traditional 9-to-5. It's just kind of giving their time in terms of sweat equity or maybe some sort of nominal or dollar amount for the hours worked.
That's a great overview. And I think that it speaks to a lot of people that are in this positioning that are considering when to take it on, and also to the organizations that are also considering what kind of candidates are available out there and what type of fractional support can be made up of. What are some considerations to make when you are assessing fractional consultants, for sure, without a doubt, and understanding the whole entire scope of their existing capacities and how that's relative to the project that you have, which is a perfect transition into my next question. Because, again, I'm looking at this from the lens of the organization that has tapped into various forms of fractional support over the years. And, from this vantage point, it's usually something of a pressing, urgent capacity that's, we need to go ahead and bring in somebody that's a SME fractional that's got the years and the show face to bring something valuable to the table very, very quickly. And the risk, I think, from the candidate side is taking these sorts of roles on and maybe the overcommitment, right? Yes. So can you speak to that a little bit? And are there warning signs, right, that both sides of the spectrum should consider in terms of knowing when to draw the line in the sand to really make this valuable and keep it at a fractional level?
Yes, it's a great question. And I do want to go back to the earlier point, though, about moonlighting. And that could be kind of a good segue or a good way for somebody to try out whether or not fractional work is a good fit for them. So I did want to kind of tie off that question with that final point. In regards to the question you just asked, a lot of it boils down to like expectation setting. That can be very, very difficult within the fractional space. I've seen far too many people that are too generous with their time. And they find themselves essentially being overutilized by a company, which can be quite difficult. Also, too, one of the reasons that we generally work with folks that are convicted about being a fractional executive is that we want to make sure that they understand what it is and what it's not, but also, too, they're not going to be a flight risk during a deployment.
Right.
So, as an example, if we work for somebody that really prefers full-time work over fractional work and parachute them into some sort of engagement, chances are high if that perfect opportunity comes across their desk that they will take it. And we're all human. I can't blame them, can't be mad at them. But we do try to mitigate some of that risk by working with folks that have either drawn a line in the sand and said, hey, I'm going to try this for a year, or that have a track record of success for being a fractional executive, because it can be challenging. It's difficult finding the right price point, the right service offering, the right availability, and then your utilization as it pertains to how many opportunities do I work at a given time, and then how much time do I give each opportunity. Like there's a lot more to it than just, hey, I'm pick up a gig and get paid, time for money. There is a little bit more math and also mental fortitude that's involved in the whole process, because it's not easy, and it does take a certain personality type to want to do it.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I mean, there are existing income streams that are competing with the supplemental ones, and there's also things that just happen in life and life's commitments. I would love to double down on the comment that you made earlier in response to when moonlighting might work, right? And it seems to definitely hone in on those that are in a transitory period, that are figuring out whether or not the fractional route is something that they can, live with, balance with, and actually make a fruitful potential revenue stream off of. In your opinion, is there a tipping point where all of these signs align and says, you know what, I'm over the moonlighting phase and I can actually do this? What are those indicators for those that are on the candidate side that can actually graduate from moonlighting and into full-time fractional support, and any advice that you could give to folks that are considering that?
It's a tough question to answer, because a lot of it boils down to personal preference, appetite for risk, personal situation. So there is a lot of calculus that's involved in figuring out if now is the right time. But part of the issue that I see a lot of folks running into is like, what service do I offer to whom, and what's the price point? And part of the magic with the fractional space is really getting kind of your arms around that. Because once you kind of understand who your ideal client profile is, what engagement will look like, what you deliver, and what the cost is, it gets a lot more clear in regards to what you can offer in the market, and can you equal the income you're making at full time or surpass it.
Right.
So that's part of it. Also, understanding your appetite for this type of work, and also like the entrepreneurs, because there's typically in these situations, it's gonna be a smaller company, founder-led, founder-run. There's not going to be an HR function. You may get paid late. You may have a super demanding entrepreneur that you're working with, and really kind of sussing out whether or not that's the appetite is also part of this equation. But I have found people that have done it. They found some success. They've enjoyed, I guess, the freedom that fractional can lend itself to. But then it comes down to taking a leap of faith. Although I have seen and talked to a lot of people that were able to convert their previous employers into some sort of contractual engagement, be it fractional or not. And I think that can be the holy grail if you can pull it off. But you also have to be ready for somebody to fire you outright if you make the ask.
I love that. And it's spoken like a true entrepreneur. And this is the leap of faith that is involved in all the complexities that begins with that initial step, right? When you decide to go on your own, when you decide to actually start that, there's so many layers that you unpacked very well there. And it certainly begins with understanding your appetite for risk, understanding your pricing modeling, and how the market is going to potentially absorb to that. And then really, deciding to go and make that leap of faith. So thank you for that. Let's take it on the other side of the spectrum, and let's look at it from the organizational vantage point. Companies that are considering tapping in to this type of talent. And I'm sure that you guys speak to organizations that may have some hesitations, some reservations about fractional support, and we can go in through what some of those reservations have been. But let's utilize this time to really debunk some myths, right, about fractional roles, and what you guys really educate the audience on when it comes to the advantages, but also addressing the misconceptions that exist within fractional support capacities. Can you elaborate on this?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. And as I mentioned, I've been at this 8 years, and I feel like the space has changed more in the last year and a half than any time before that.
Sure.
So it's still very much in flux. There's saturation on the supply side. There's companies that are more interested in it. So it's really, really changing. What I have found is that there's one of two camps here. Either you understand and value fractional or you don't.
Yeah.
And if you don't, that's totally cool. Again, we do full-time placement as well. Let's talk about that. But I don't really try to spend any time or cycles trying to convince somebody on the value that a fractional executive can bring if they don't get it, because there are those that just they don't get it, they don't want it, they want nothing to do with it. Totally their prerogative. It's their business. Do what you want. For those that do understand the value, the conversation obviously is a lot easier because they've already kind of maybe self-educated or understand, just kind of more so from an entrepreneurship perspective, a little bit more progressive. And that's what we typically see as well, is that, different mindset as it pertains to work-life balance, the use of resources, bringing in people quicker for shorter-term projects. Ultimately, majority of the folks that leverage and want to leverage fractional talent want to scale and scale very, very quickly. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And it definitely gives some indicators of what are the type of settings where fractional support may be better utilized, or maybe a consideration to even tap into.
Sure.
If you're looking at a hyper growth, an aggressive deadline, perhaps the complementary or the ancillary team members that may or may not have certain expertise that you need now. And this seems to be a need that's finite in nature. These are qualities and characteristics that I'm sure are strong indicators to consider some of the benefits of tapping into fractional work, especially on the client side. And what I think is just period, like I don't know if it can be underscored enough, is that the year or the trend that you guys have been seeing, that we've all been seeing the last year and a half, is that work is going to be procured in a more flexible and agile nature.
Right.
And that is what it is. And there's certain candidates that can offer a lot of value in leveraging that for a definite period of time, given some of their expertise. But with that comes some of the complexities that's also evolving from a regulatory perspective. And you know me, Beau, at this point, this is where I'll geek out a little bit on all the nuances that are tied into government and oversight in properly establishing your entity, doing all of the nuances that are associated with being a fractional support person from a compliance standpoint and also from an organizational standpoint. Are there any pitfalls or just recommendations that you would give to maybe that candidate and or that company when it comes to the compliance landscape at this time?
So compliance is not necessarily as much my wheelhouse as it is yours, which is why we I will say that, a catalyst for a lot of companies that we talk to for bringing in fractional support is when they're founder-led, founder-run. They reach a point where maybe they're out over their skis, or they're finding that they're dividing their day upon too many different types of activities, and they need to remove themselves from the situation and bring in an executive that can take it from 5 million to 10 million, 10 to 20, et cetera. The compliance component is very, very interesting. And again, we leverage My Base Pay as part of our back-end provider to help alleviate some of those concerns, both on the insurance front, time management component, and then the designation between 1099 and W-2, because it is pretty nuanced. For sure.
Yeah, and it's definitely an area that I think just simply knowing exists, and it's if you understand the market that you service and the risk that's associated with any entrepreneur, and understanding what those risks are is the first step. And there are a lot of different platforms and services that come in and address those risks very well. So thank you for giving My Base Pay a shout out.
Yes.
We definitely do like to say that we handle the headache that comes with all of those compliance parameters that certainly exist in this complex, evolving landscape. But as we're wrapping up today's show, I just got one more question for you here, Beau. When it comes to what you've seen over the last year, talk to us about what you see coming, right? What are you looking at from a future standpoint in terms of this on-demand, agile workforce, maybe even a benched workforce of fractional support capacities? Do you see this growing considerably more? Do you see it evolving and maybe changing into different directions? Anything, if you had a crystal ball in front of you right now, right? What would you say this looks like in the years ahead?
Clearly, I'm very bullish on the space and the concept, but also admittedly so, I was early. I was super early on this, and it's been a bit of a slower burn than I envisioned. Part of the speed up that we've seen, of course, was COVID. the changing workforce dynamics of the baby boomers and Generation X, particularly the latter group having a different mindset as it pertains to like work-life balance, and that's driven some of the change, which has been fantastic. And then you look at the corporate landscape, and 70% of the executives would leave their job tomorrow for fractional work if there was enough work.
Wow.
So I'm very, very bullish on the space. If you look at the growth curve, I mean, we've by no means rounded the hockey stick, but I'm very confident in the next 12, 15 months, maybe longer, maybe a little bit shorter, we'll see a dramatic uptick in regards to companies that are leveraging fractional resource. And that, again, part of that's due to baby boomers coming up for retirement age, Generation X, Y taking over, the CEO spot with different mindset as it pertains to work-life balance. So I'm very, very confident that we will see this continue. And it also started with the gig economy, with Fiverr, with Uber. And if you look at kind of, the macro view, like just the US population in general, a lot of folks are opting to work kind of on their terms. And it's going to take a little while for that to continue to resonate at the executive level. But I'm confident. I'm confident it's happening, and it's happening in real time. And if you've got a demonstrable background, some expertise, and you can fetch a market premium, why would you not try?
Yeah, it's almost like all of the characteristics for the perfect storm that's happening right before us. And it's exciting to be a part of it, for sure.
It's exciting, but it's also with that, there is a lot of saturation. There is a lot of noise. Right now, I will say that there's a bit of a disproportionate amount of talent to demand, so supply and demand. A lot of that's just by virtue of layoffs that we've had in the tech sector and a myriad of other kind of economic conditions that have presented themselves. But once people start going back to work for corporate America, and kind of that supply-demand ratio is right-sided a little bit, clear on the value that can be derived from fractional execs, and we'll continue this kind of upward tick.
Love it. Love it. Well, thank you, Beau. It's been awesome chatting with you. I think you've definitely offered an educative lens on this and gone through some of the advantages along with the realistic environment that we find ourselves in. So we appreciate it. All right. So let's give a quick shout out to Beau. And Beau, maybe you want to just let the audience know how we can get in contact with you. What is the best way to reach out to Beau?
Sure. And again, really appreciate you having me on. Truly appreciate it and love the Leaders Unfiltered moniker and kind of what you're doing with the show. And so excited to see where this lands. And I'm glad to be kind of one of the early guests. In regards to getting in touch, so Beau Billington, at the free agent, or beau@thefreeagent.com is actually my email address. I'm pretty present on LinkedIn, again, at my namesake, but feel free to hop on our website as well, thefreeagent.com, contact us, and we're highly responsive and love having questions and having dialogue and conversations, even with folks that are just kicking the tires and trying to figure out the fractional space is right for them or not.
Thank you, Beau. And by the way, coolest company name ever, the free agent. I love that.
I appreciate it. But it's a mixed bag. Some people are like, I love it, and others are like, what? I don't get it.
I'm sure you have a lot more I love it than anything
It's starting to resonate, particularly as I'm starting to kind of shy away from using fractional so much and more so kind of utilize the free agent as how we refer to our talent.
I love it. It's truly what you guys have to figure out and do to get people to work. So awesome. Thank you guys so much for joining us. To our audience, wherever you are tuning in from, we appreciate it. Beau, thank you for joining us. And like you said, for being one of our earliest guests. We appreciate the support. We appreciate the knowledge bombs that you dropped. And I think that this episode will be very advantageous if you are considering tapping into this type of contract labor, or you are considering becoming a candidate of the fractional market out there. So appreciate everyone's time. We'll see you guys on the next episode of Leaders Unfiltered. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you.